Which actor killed it in an unexpected role? Story 1. Arnold as the Terminator. No one expected him to be any more than a buff, kind of scary dude. He killed that role and helped make it into the household name it is today, instead of just a one-and-done action movie. Story 2. Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings. They had originally cast a much younger man who pulled out at the last minute, and Viggo taking on the role of Aragorn was kind of a slapdash job. However, this stroke of bad luck, or perhaps good luck, worked perfectly because while Aragorn was young, in that he was a descendant of Numenor and had that unnatural lifespan, he's actually an 87-year-old man, and carries himself with the wisdom and confidence of someone that age. Viggo, being in his 40s at the time of filming, gave him that presentation that a man in their young 20s would have never been able to pull off, and he was incredible in that role because of it. Story 3. I cannot express how shocking The Truman Show was when it came out. You're telling me the lanky TV comedy guy who crawled out of a rhino butthole is going to make me cry like a child who just dropped their ice cream like 6 times in one movie? Then he did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and a whole nation was all Fire Marshal Bill. Is a great actor. Felt like we were taking crazy pills. Story 4. Will Ferrell in Stranger Than Fiction. I think Will Ferrell is one of those people who's just a version of the same character in every single thing that he's in, with the exception of Stranger Than Fiction. It's still a comedy, but it's super unlike anything else he's in. Also, John C. Reilly is in more serious movies than you'd think, if you only know him from the goofy stuff. Story 5. Hugh Laurie in House. For all of us that knew him from his long history of comedic roles, Blackadder, Jeeves, and Wooster, etc., it was quite a shock to see him go from playing a British twit to a cranky American doctor, but he certainly nailed it. Story 6. Bruce Willis in Die Hard. I'm old enough to remember him as just the snarky guy in Moonlighting. I remember seeing a poster for Die Hard and thinking this movie is going to be crap. Then a friend of mine saw it and practically dragged me to the movie theater, and within minutes, I was hooked, and it was Alan Rickman's very first movie, ever, and he was also totally hooked me in as well. Story 7. A lot of comedians actually do their best work when they're in a dramatic role. Will Ferrell's best ever performance was Stranger Than Fiction. Jim Carrey's was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Robin Williams was amazing in everything. The therapist he played in Good Will Hunting leapt to mind, but man is there a lot to choose from. Story 8. Johnny Depp was well known by the early 2000s and had some pretty big roles, but he was far from a mainstream name. Like the Hot Topic, crowd knew who he was, sure, but not a household name. And he was starring in a movie in a long-dead genre based on a Disney theme park ride. Nobody had high expectations going in. Then Captain Jack Sparrow stepped off his sinking boat and into cinema history. Story 9. Ahmed Best as Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace. I don't say this because I enjoyed the character, but he acted his heart out to create the character and gave George Lucas exactly what he asked for, only to then everyone just shit on it so badly that he considered suicide. What he sacrificed for that role deserves to be recognized. For the character that was written, he killed it. Story 10. Gary Oldman. That is all. Just any role where the actor is great, but you can't quite place him. It's Gary Oldman. Then when you get up to go to the bathroom and look in the mirror while washing your hands and boom, you've been Gary fricking Oldman all along. Story 11. Heath Ledger as Joker. I honestly thought before the movie came out it will be a bad one to make him, and was more inclined to have Willem Dafoe. But the man blew the roof off with that performance of his when I saw the movie when it came out. Story 12. Zendaya as Rue in Euphoria. It was such a departure from her previous Disney characters, and she was known as a beautiful fashion girl at that point. I've definitely soured on Euphoria since it came out, but her performance blows me away. Story 13. Heath Ledger as the Joker. When I first heard he had been picked, I was horrified. He was known for his tween teen girl-centric movies and being the heartthrob blah blah blah. That's all I knew of him. Then came The Dark Knight. In retrospect, I can't think of an actor that could have done better. You were seeing the Joker. Not Heath Ledger playing the Joker, but the Joker himself. Heath Ledger, the actor, was unrecognizable, and all you saw was the Joker. Maybe it's just my brain, but in every movie where a character is played by some well-known actor, my brain sees the actor playing their character. I don't just see the character. Heath Ledger as the Joker was the first time my brain only saw the character and never registered the actor. It was amazing. Story 14. Deep cut after a weekend of going through the series, but Richard Pryor as Gus Gorman in Superman 3. For a poorly written slapstick superhero movie, somehow the comic relief villain being the real threat to Superman fits the tone for whatever it was they were going for. Story 15. I'm gonna go with Leslie Nielsen. I wasn't alive yet back then, but from what I've heard, he's only played serious roles before, so him changing over to comedy was a surprise for many. But he crushed it so hard. The Naked Gun movies are still my absolute favorite comedy movies and make me laugh like nothing else. Story 16. I don't know how unexpected it was, but Paul Giamatti was profoundly good in Sideways, in what was not a very likable character. From the very beginning of the film, we see him lying to his friend, stealing money from his mother, depressed over the failure of his marriage, which we later learn was partially a result of his infidelity. And yet I still find myself rooting for this character and relieved at the optimistic possibilities of the ending. In particular, the scene just after the wedding where his now remarried ex tells him about her pregnancy. The look on his face, his reaction as he tries to continue smiling while he's absolutely devastated. It's just a virtuoso performance in every sense. Story 17. Heath Ledger? That guy from Brokeback Mountain and 10 Things I Hate About You? As the Joker? What do you mean he's good? Nobody can top Nicholson? An Oscar win for a comic book movie? People said he was the best Joker, and he is still compared to as the gold standard for the character. Story 18. Tom Cruise in Interview with a Vampire. As a huge fan of the Anne Rice novels, I was outraged along with everyone at the casting. And then, in typical TC fashion, he shut us all the fuck up with an amazing performance. Story 19. Tom Hanks in Road to Perdition. He plays a mafia enforcer. It was a heavy film and I was pretty impressed. I didn't think I'd ever see a movie where Tom Hanks murders anyone. Story 20. Matt Damon as Jason Bourne. The dude was solving math problems as a school janitor previously, and then came out as an action star. The Bourne movies, minus the Jeremy Renner abomination, is in my opinion arguably one of the best action franchises of all time. Story 21. Bill Burr in The Mandalorian. I had never liked Bill Burr as an actor. He was funny enough as a comic, but always just seemed like the sarcastic guy at the end of the bar waiting to make a snide comment, and I never thought of him as anything more. Then he played that part where he shot his old officer, even though he assumed it meant it would cost him his life, and he nailed every single nuance of that role. So sorry, Bill, I was wrong and you rock. Story 22. Bruce Willis in Die Hard. He was only known for the TV show Moonlighting and a failed comedy, Blind Date. He shocked everyone as John McClane with both his ability to be an action hero and his dramatic chops when he thinks he isn't going to survive and tells Al to give his wife a message. Story 23 for me, Tom Cruise in Collateral. For most of the film I was thinking, why Tom Cruise? There's loads of other grittier actors that could have played that role. Then when it finished, I realized I couldn't name a single person who would play the part better. One of my unexpected favorite films of all time. Story 24. I'm probably the only one here who knows this movie exists, but in 1991, a movie adaptation of a Vietnam War novel called Flight of the Intruder was made for TV, starring Brad Johnson, Danny Glover, and Tom Sizemore. However, the star of the show is Willem Dafoe, who plays Lieutenant Commander Virgil Cole, a decorated BN, Bombardier Navigator, and a certified wild man. Dafoe not only did the role justice, he knocked it out of the park. Story 25. Steve Carell in Little Miss Sunshine. He never loses his signature charm, but his role as a man barely hanging on after a suicide attempt is so stellar. He has some amazing monologues and emotional moments in this movie. Story 26. I thought Sean Bean nailed it in Sharp. The original actor was Paul McGann, who injured himself during rehearsals, so Sean was a last-minute replacement. Apparently he was so good in it, Bernard Cornell changed his description of Sharp to be like Sean in his later books. Story 27. Andrew Lincoln as Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead. Who could have guessed the hopeless romantic from Love actually could play a brutal character with such humanity and soulfulness? The fact that he never won any awards for that role is criminal. Story 28. John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Before that movie, he was very much typecasted as a musical actor after Grease. His career was not doing hot, and he was casted by Quentin because he saw the vision. He obviously crushed it, and it changed the course of Travolta's career for the better IMO. Story 29. I just watched Sexy Beast, and seeing Ben Kingsley as a psychopath Cockney gangster came completely out of nowhere, and he absolutely killed it. I don't think I'll be able to watch the new TV series spin-off now because of Kingsley's performance in the movie. Anything will pale in comparison. Story 30. Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. I remember all comments saying it was a terrible choice. I also thought it was kinda weird when I saw him in the first trailer. Then, when you see the actual movie, it's probably one of the best, most convincing performances in the history of movies. Story 31, Robin Williams. But wait, Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. We always saw him in comedic roles, or at least mentoring roles. So when he plays a dude that has an obsession with a family and becomes a stalker, the creeps. He does it so well that you never see him as we used to see him. And then to top it, he does that episode in Law and Order SVU. So yeah, Robin Williams can play a villain effectively. Story 32. Brendan Fraser in The Mummy, specifically the first one. Fresh off of Blast from the Past and George of the Jungle, Rick O'Connell as a character really forced a little more range out of Fraser. He had the gravitas when called for, but also had amazing comedic timing and excellent chemistry with his co-stars. Honestly, after The Mummy, I think Brendan might have had the opportunity to change the direction of his career into more serious roles, if he'd wanted to. It was fun seeing him on Scrubs not long after, too. Story 33, Ronnie Cox, as an unforgettably cold and calculating villain, Dick Jones, in RoboCop. Prior to this film, he generally played good and kind characters. Interestingly, Kurtwood Smith did the reverse, and went from playing my favorite ever movie villain, Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop, to playing a TV sitcom dad. Story 34, hard to take her serious as an actress. Hope a woman is okay as not an actor, but an actress. I'd have to actually say Kim Kardashian. No, not for her X-rated thing. No, not for the dumb reality crap. But in American Horror Stories, feel like she actually showed she's more than, well, nothing. She actually can act. Not saying give her an Emmy or anything, but figure she'd be lame in it. I feel like she did way better than anyone would have thought, considering. Story 35, Mark Wahlberg in I Heart Huckabees. He's been in a lot of bad movies and turned in a lot of bad performances, but there are a handful of examples of him doing comedy really well, particularly I Heart Huckabees. It's a film with a quirky sense of humor, and he nails it. Story 36. Toni Collette in Hereditary. I don't know how unexpected the role was of her, but her character is like half of what made the movie so great. I remember thinking she deserved an Oscar for her performance, but it's not an Oscar-friendly role. Story 37. Jude Law as young Dumbledore in Fantastic Beasts 2. Where are all the beasts? He has a tiny moment toward the end with barely any dialogue, but he steals the whole film with his presence and charisma. Story 38. Heath Ledger as the Joker. I remember when it was first announced that he was playing the part, everyone I knew was certain it was a mistake and that he was going to be a terrible fit for the role. All those same people, myself included, came to realize just how wrong we were by the end of the bank heist at the start of the movie. Story 39, Matthew McConaughey in Dallas Buyers Club. Sort of cheating, but any of the actresses that won Best Actress in a pretty dark movie the past couple decades? Emma Stone, Natalie Portman, Charlize Theron come to mind. Story 40, Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. I'll admit I haven't followed his career particularly closely through the years, but that seemed like the role of a lifetime for him. His performance has really stuck in my brain as probably the best part of the movie, which I was super impressed with overall, ever since I saw it at the cinema when it came out. Story 41. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson as the Golden Trio, aka Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger, respectively. All of them were relative nobodies, only known very locally in things like TV commercials showing kids, theater stages, etc., but these days you cannot picture Harry Potter anymore without them. I'll also throw Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy in there, actually, especially because his life story is much more available these days through his autobiography, Beyond the Wand. I especially applaud the book because it shines a lot of light on what it's like to be a child actor, something that's often obscured. Makes me dread that remake they're doing because nothing will ever live up to Trio, I think. Story 42. Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. Whatever you think of his personal life, Depp hauled that movie onto his back and fucking carried it to the promised land. There's no way the movie would have been a fraction as popular as it wound up being without him anchoring it. On the voice acting front, I'll toss in a shout out to Jim Cummings as Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog animated series. Cummings was mostly known for bumbling comedic characters. He was the 90s voice of Pete from the Goofy continuity and took over as Winnie the Pooh and Tigger when their respective voice actors couldn't continue. So one might be excused for thinking he couldn't carry a legitimately villainous role, yet he did so in spades. Cummings gave Robotnik a deep, brooding baritone and made him a legitimately terrifying menace. Honorable mention, Alan Young as Scrooge McDuck. Young was best known, prior to that point in his career, as Wilbur, the owner of the eponymous talking horse in the 60s sitcom Mr. Ed, and until he landed the role of Scrooge, was mostly known for playing plucky, folksy characters. Him suddenly taking on a lively Scottish billionaire duck and absolutely killing it came completely out of left field. Story 43. I know we all know how great Robin Williams was, but I grew up seeing him as Mork and then Genie, so when I got a bit older and saw him in What Dreams May Come, I couldn't believe it. I sobbed through most of that movie, but it was all so clear how deeply that man felt, and he was able to showcase those feelings in everything he did. Even in Aladdin, I was just too young to really get it. Story 44, Bryan Cranston as Walter White, Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman, Anna Gunn as Skylar White, R.J. Might as Walt Jr., a.k.a. Flynn, fellow cerebral palsy bro, James Morgan Jimmy McGill as Saul Goodman. The list goes on. My top two is Brian and Paul. You really did get to see those two together working very well in that series, and in my opinion really helped make the show. And the rest of the cast, I relate to RJ the most because cerebral palsy, that's very deep with me. Story 45. Maybe not unexpected, but I thought Timothée Chalamet in The King was some of the best acting I've seen in years. I know he's got some talent, but this was true A-list acting.